Welcome, everyone. Today, we are going to be talking about toxic spirituality. This is a very hot topic right now, and I think it's super important that we really go over this because people are really seeking out spiritual growth. It's a very important subject, but a lot of people are getting locked into some of the wrong directions, and they're really getting disappointed with these spiritual leaders that are out there that are really kind of presenting a really bad taste for the people that really are making an mission and a true passion for their life. But you and I were talking and you started to tell me this story, so I'm gonna let you go ahead and tell me this story about what happened with you.
A lot of people who impart spiritual toxicity on others kind of leverage the same strategies and techniques as people who get involved in toxic relationships. They impact the other person, in terms of their self-conscious. And this to me is almost one of the worst type of offenses because it can go on for so long. And that goes into the example that I was getting ready to tell Michelle earlier. I was at this beautiful spiritual convention in Kos, Greece a few months ago. And I met this really lovely lady, and we were just, chatting outside of the convention on a break. And she said to me, "Oh my God, I love your eyelashes." And I said, "Hey girl, you can get them at Walgreens, $10 for like a 5-pack. And she said, "Oh my gosh," she said, "but I would never wear them." And I said, "Well, why not?" I said, "You deserve to do you and have fun." I started wearing them when I lived in Utah, and I asked this lady why all the women wore these really long eyelashes. She said, "Oh, honey, the longer the eyelashes, the closer to God." And I was like, I could get with that.
I love it. The longer the eyelashes, the closer to God.
Lady says, "Well, the thing is a lot of people will look down on you for doing that." And I said, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Yeah, they'll say you can't wear this or do this or whatnot." And she said, "They'll just be really derogatory. And I feel like I'm just trying to find a place where I fit in." That really gave me pause because, certainly there are types of spiritual communities and organizations, where they focus on an ascetic lifestyle, giving up, worldly things and just focusing 100% primarily on God. But those types of organizations tend to be cloistered environments. This is like, becoming a nun in a convent or, maybe a Buddhist monk living in an ashram. You give up everything. In the context of what this lady was telling me about, these are groups of people who live in the world, right? They want to live in the world, but not of the world. They're not associated with necessarily a particular religion, maybe like an Amish community or something where it's highly important for them to maintain a certain standard of living, of which, the manner of dress and the way you wear your hair and stuff, for them comes, from particular scriptures, right? The example the lady is giving me is, she's meeting up with groups, that are social groups, essentially, of people who are trying to come together to support each other in their spiritual path. And they're treating each other in a derogatory manner, wow, which is not uplifting. When we want to be involved in a spiritual community, one of the purposes for that is that we can be supported, because we all usually have come from some background of pain, hurt, suffering to some degree or another. And if we weren't just naturally spiritually inclined, of which most people are not just born to be that way, they come into it later on when they just feel unsatisfied with the way that, society is, or, other certain things. They want to heal from their traumas. Being exposed to folks who degrade them verbally or emotionally, make them feel like they are less rather than building them up, is, in my opinion, certainly a form of spiritual toxicity that should be, looked for. Because if you're going to meet up with a spiritual group to get in touch with the divine and you're leaving feeling like crap about yourself, I would question if that experience is something that's really lifting you up. Now, of course, there is a component of spiritual transformation where you have to engage in a pathway of self-mastery that requires you to address your own insecurities, your own traumas and pain, and to exert mastery over yourself rather than allow forces to master you. But that comes through your spiritual practice. It should not be something that's invoked upon you by your brother or sister in a spiritual group when their role is to support you. So, is any group, any social group or spiritual group going to be perfect? No. When we're going through spiritual transformative processes, you end up not only with your individual transformation, but then also with a collective transformation. And humans aren't perfect. So sometimes there's going to be interactions that aren't necessarily positive. The appropriate response always, though, is to ask yourself why. Is it that the person is having a bad day? They're going through their own stuff. It's something that they can heal from and be supported through, just like you need to be? Or is this a situation in which somebody has come into the group and they're looking to vie for some kind of power, mentally, emotionally, or otherwise, and they're engaging in these manipulative behaviors? Your spiritual community should be actively working to not include this. And if it is included in interaction, for it to be worked through. If it's not being worked through, then you have to ask yourself if it's the right community for you. It's not helping you to be involved in a toxic environment.
I absolutely agree with that. And me personally, I used to be a cigarette smoker, and I smoked since I was 18. And there was a point in which, as I started evolving spiritually, I felt that spirit was kind of telling me I needed to quit smoking. Still took me some time to finally get to that point where I was able to let it go. I had people say to me, "How can you be so spiritual if you smoke cigarettes?" And here's the thing. If somebody is saying something like that to you, they are so way off base, because you've got to allow spirit to move through you and at your own time. For me, I had to get to a point to where there was something impressing upon me that I was like, all right, I'm ready. And just thinking about like one of my clients right now, he had an addiction. He didn't tell me this in the beginning when we started working together. So as he starts getting better and he starts improving, and then we start kind of getting into some of the spiritual aspects of it, he starts saying, "I'm ready to quit." And that was all on his own. And he brought it up and started telling me, and he just did it cold turkey. If I would have known about it and I would have said, "Oh, well, I can't teach you anything spiritual because you've got to let this go first," that would have just been wrong. A good spiritual teacher is going to come at that person at their level, and they're going to help them elevate and rise to where their own personal genius actually steps in and says, "Okay, it's time." And that where they're making that connection with it, they can hear that within themselves and they can believe in themselves enough to do it.
I think that the delicate line here
Mhm.
is in trying to utilize a particular habit as a defining factor with respect to someone's level of spirituality.
Right.
A person who is elevating in the spirit finds themselves naturally wanting to shed things that are not good for them physically, mentally, emotionally, and in terms of their actions. It doesn't disqualify you from being on a spiritual path
Mhm.
if you have certain habits, right? The path is meant to help purify you of those things over time. Now, there's, of course, I feel like it's always important, to reinforce there's certain lines, right? Abuse of any kind is just that's a line. I'm just abusing this person while I purify. But if it's something like smoking a cigarette, bad eating habits, or something of that nature, those are not so that you can't be in a group with other people, nor should you be judged for that, right? And then let's just be honest, okay? Only God can judge. That's it. That's the truth. That's not a reflection of you. That's a reflection of them. The way I look at it is like this, I overcame trauma from mental, emotional, sexual abuse, and eating disorder, various toxic relationships. I was in severe depression, chronic anxiety. I mean, I got a laundry list of things that I overcame in the past 20 years working my spiritual path.
Mhm.
This one thing, is it great? No, is it? But when I consider all of the things the Lord blessed me with strength to overcome, this was like the pacifier that I kept with me while I overcame my eating disorder, while I overcame my depression, while I broke free from toxic relationships, while I learned how to overcome anxiety that was so bad I had it 24 hours a day, sometimes for weeks to months. So you don't know what somebody has gone through in their life.
Right,
You judge
exactly.
them by their eyelashes or the fact that they smoke a cigarette or whatever, please.
I know, I know. And I've noticed that you've like posted a couple of things like on Facebook about I can be sexy and spiritual, or when somebody tells you you can't do that. And I just felt like when you said that, I was just like, go girl. You can be all beautiful and all sexy and wear your eyelashes and hair extensions, or if you have any, or go and get your eyebrows tattooed or whatever, get some face injections to get rid of the wrinkles, whatever. It doesn't, none of this really has anything to do with anything except for I'm doing it because it makes me feel good.
It really comes down to what you're attached to. And
Mhm.
I feel like this, I'm really glad you brought this up because I have seen women, for example, I'm a scientist and engineer. I've seen women in my industry who didn't want to wear makeup or get their hair done or dress, in something feminine because they were afraid of how others would look at them. And when they had the opportunity to have a makeover, it was like the light just shined in them. It was like they really felt like their best self was coming out. I've also seen women, though, who've been so addicted to their beauty. It's like it's a crutch. They can't live without the injections and all this and that. It sends them into fits of insecurity. There was a woman many years ago at the temple that I served at in California who would miss our monthly initiation ceremony, which she was an officer in, because it was the only time she could go get her extensions, right? She couldn't live without it. So what it really comes down to is the thing itself is not the defining factor of your spirituality. It's where you are inside. And in your spiritual path is about becoming the most potent version of yourself, the best version of yourself, whatever that is, right? Whether it's you being an intellectual, whether it's you finally feeling comfortable with your body. I mean, I used to hate my body. I used to hate looking in the mirror. I feel freaking fabulous and I'm flaunting it because I spent so many years of my life hating the way that I look. And
Yeah.
so I'm not addicted to it. I'm not attached to it. I appreciate the fact that I can engage in self-care. In the morning, I love to sit and listen to, my Greek language lessons while I'm doing my hair. It's relaxing for me. It's a manner of self-care for me. If I don't have time to do it, I can't do it. I have to be on a morning meeting with China Regulatory. Then it's hair pulled back, nice shirt on, glasses on, sitting there at 6 a.m. You do what you have to do. You have to be aware of yourself and how something impacts you with respect to its necessity, right? If you're a smoker, for example, you have to ask yourself, what's the purpose of this in my life? Is it that I just can't let it go? Or is it that, I'm choosing this one thing to hold on to while I overcome the myriad of other things that are far more exigent to my personal well-being than this. And once that's done, I'm going to work on tossing this because I know I overcame all that. I can definitely overcome this too. Right?
Yeah.
You have to be honest with yourself, though. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie.
Yeah. Absolutely. Another thing that I've seen a lot is the idea of certain people like reject other people because of their energy. They're supposed to be claiming that there's some kind of spiritual teachers, representative of some sort, and this happens a lot in the spiritual community. I haven't seen it within our organization that we're part of, but what I have seen it is with a lot of people that have very little knowledge and are, kind of new agey, and they tend to say things like, your energy it's just weighing on me and I can't handle it. And my attitude is, when I sit with somebody who is at a low energy, they're very low vibration, my goal is pull the energy down from source and project it out to them, and then shut light on their beauty so they can raise that vibration and point out those beautiful things about them. Like, here's what I see about you, here's this, and what it does, it raises them. But if you point out that somebody's got low energy and they're low this and you're low that, this is, you're blah, I can't be around you, it's making it bigger and making them feel depleted, and where they just like, nobody accepts me, nobody loves me, even the spiritual people think I'm too, I'm not good enough. And that's sad, because these are the people that we're supposed to help. I mean, like, look at Jesus, for example. What did he do? He had dinner with the tax collector, the prostitutes, the beggars, and the poor people, and he washed their feet, and he had dinner with them. Like, and when the disciples said, why are you doing this? He said, how is it serving to help people that are already spiritually enlightened? You're already there. Like, my goal is to get out there and help those that need help. And if you sit here and you have this God complex, of who you are, then that's a problem. This conversation is mostly about like being aware of, if somebody is showing you love and acceptance and willing to help you, then that's one thing. But if somebody's throwing out judgment and criticism and saying, okay, well, here's what your problem is, and da 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 da, da, and you're not, you're never going to get where you need to go if you don't do this, let God do that. Just shed that light on them and offer your support. And that's the kind of person that is going to help you grow,
I feel like it's always important to understand the different contexts, because a lot of people think in black and white, right? And that's something we have to break ourselves free from. I've observed what you observe. There will be people who, what's the qualities here? They come in and they're projecting themselves as higher than someone else, right? As at a higher energy level. I'm better than you. And then they follow that up by taking the opportunity to point out in some way how they're better than the other person. That is toxic behavior. However, a similar situation can occur, with somebody who maybe themselves is really being very toxic. They want to keep coming to the group or the temple or the church week after week after week, dragging up old dirt. They always want to talk about everything that's terrible all the time. And, no matter who is trying to help comfort them, they just naysay it all the time. They don't want help, right? They just want someone who's going to listen to their complaints. That might be a situation where someone pulls them to the side and just says, hey, look, I love you and you're a valuable part of our community, but your energy is low and you're impacting everyone else because it's habitual. It's not acute. It's not you just had a bad day. It's you're coming in here week after week after week, month after month after month with the same thing. You're not doing the work to transform. So out of love, I'm telling you, you have to reflect on yourself and get it together. Sometimes people just need that, but we can relay that kind of information respectfully. We don't have to do it, in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
And we also just have to understand that the way people receive information and give information is interpreted differently. Somebody might say something that they feel is totally non-inflammatory, but the other person might take it as offense. And so we have to be reflective in those situations. And the only way through them is just to have an honest talk and just say, when you said this to me, the way it impacted me was this. Did you mean it that way? Okay, you didn't mean it that way. Can as a friend tell you that I would receive that information better if you said that same thing to me, but in this manner, right? You know, maybe with just like a little bit of a lower voice or a different choice of words. You know, helping each other to grow is great. And recognizing the diversity of, you know, people is also beautiful, because the divine created all of us, you know, to be our own expression of the divine. But we don't want to reinforce behaviors and words that de-elevate us. We want to reinforce behaviors and words that elevate us. And sometimes, and that's where, like, you know, medicine in one situation might be a poison in another. We have to be always willing to self-evaluate and ask ourselves, was that the right way to go about it? And is it just situational with that one person, or is it everyone? You know, if you're saying something to 10 people and they all tell you, look, the way you're saying that is not well received because it sounds really shitty and bitchy, then you might have to ask yourself, okay, do I need to reflect on the way in which I'm projecting my words? But if it's just one person and everybody else says, no, I think you're fine, maybe that it's just that other person. It's a learning process. So we just have to be open to the learning process and really recognizing if it's toxic or not. But taking the time to recognize it is very important, because a lot of people, they just enter into spaces with other spiritual people and they just trust them 100% and completely ignore any understanding that there might be people around that are not good for them.
I agree with you 100%. I'm glad that you kind of broke it down like that and really kind of said, here's the exception to the rule. What I was talking about wasn't somebody who's continuously toxic. I was talking about somebody who's coming in broken and they're asking for help. I have never experienced this with anybody in our stuff, but I have definitely experienced it with, I've seen other people.
It happens all the time. I mean, that's why spiritual communities get bad reputations, because there's people who come in there and they're taking advantage of people and they're manipulating people who are in a state where they're trying to be open to something new. They don't know what's going on. They're easy prey for people like that.
I was in a Reiki class once, and there was like 5 of us, and we were going through this day by day. And there's this one girl, she was in the middle of this transformational process. Okay. And she was very attached to her husband. And her husband was in the class, and she would like have to sit next to him. And, you know, just, she was, you know, that kind of person that can't do anything without him. I can't go to the store without him. I can't do that. And this was annoying the hell out of somebody else. Every time she had a question or something she was trying to figure out, or something she was struggling with that she was trying to figure out, like, how do I do this? Or is this going to help with this? This was absolutely driving this one girl crazy. And so she pulled me aside and she says, how do you deal with that? She goes, I just can't. If she says one other word, I'm just going to like lose it. And I'm like, she's just trying to learn. She's just trying to grow. And granted, this person that I'm talking about that eventually got to such a really good space that she became a yoga instructor. She started teaching breath work, and she learned how to find herself without being so attached to her husband. But it took the patience of somebody who said, I love you and I'm going to help you through this process. And the other person that was so like, I don't like her vibration. It's just like, we're trying to do spiritual stuff and she's driving me crazy. And it's like, can't you just experience a little compassion for a second and just understand where she's at and just show a little love?
She was there in a space with her husband too, who was charged with her care. It really was not that other lady's business what was going on. Yeah. And if you find yourself in that position as the lady, really what you should do, rather than worrying about what's going on with the other person, is ask yourself, why is what's going on with them impacting you? Because you are responsible for you. You have control over you. You don't have control over everybody else. And if they're not doing something that's so terrible, it's going to get them kicked out of the class, The only thing you can do is work on exerting some mastery over your mind and your emotions. That's part of spiritual training, whether you're in a yoga class or not. There's this wonderful story that one of my mentors told me when I was younger. His name was Jonathan Shear. He was my transcendental meditation instructor.
Mhm.
And he was telling me about this one time when Maharishi was teaching essentially his group of students. And he had rented this studio, I think it was in New York, and literally right outside was the train. And he said they would go to sit down and this train would go by for like 5 minutes, and people would complain about it. Can't we go to another place that's quieter and this and that? Why do we have to put up with the train? And Maharshi said to them, do you need to have the room quiet so that it can meditate for you? And I just thought, wow, that was fantastic for me at the time where I was at mentally and emotionally, because I was learning really for the first time the skills of having mastery over myself. When people have reactions to things outside of them and they blame it on everyone else or the environment or whatnot, they're working with what is known as an external locus of control, i.e., these things are happening to me and I have no control over them. So I'm just going to throw a fit inside, but it does nothing for you. You can't escape that. However, once you turn to what's known as an internal locus of control, you realize that no matter what's going on outside of you, even if somebody comes up to you and they say something derogatory or shitty to you, or you have a jackhammer going on outside your office building when you're trying to meditate in your office, it doesn't matter, because you have control over yourself. You have the choice. And I think that's a really great addition to this conversation when it comes to toxicity. No matter where you go in life, you can be at the grocery store, you can be at work, a family gathering, a spiritual gathering, where there are more than two people, eventually at some point there's going to be friction. And so if you are trying to actively be on a spiritual path, your only responsibility is to yourself. If somebody comes up to you and they say derogatory things to you, you can either allow them to hurt you, or you can remain firm in yourself and not respond accordingly. And eventually that person will go away. It's the whole bully thing. They want to bully you. They're not getting a reaction. They'll find someone else to do it. If they're going from person to person to person doing the same thing, eventually they build a reputation for being a toxic person. And what happens? They don't feel at home there anymore, or they don't feel like there's anyone left to manipulate, and they leave, or everyone else in the group decides that that person is too dangerous to be in the group, and they're clearly not changing and leveraging the tradition that they're supposed to be there learning, and they will remove them themselves. So there's many responsibilities in this situation. The one you have to yourself, the one you have towards the group. You have to ask yourself, where's the line here with toxicity? Has this person done anything that's so terrible? If it's somebody who's coming in and they just have never learned what it means to have a positive relationship, that person may just need some patience and an individual like you to not react, instead respond to them in a way that remodels what healthy communication is.
I have to tell you a funny story that has to do with this. This is really, I think it's cute. And I think this is a way we can kind of like close this off. I worked with a spiritual master that was a Taoist monk, really kind of close to the end of our work. He said to me, one day, somebody's going to make the most beautiful love to you, and you're going to feel the most peace you've ever felt in your entire life. And then he looks at me and his eyes got real big and they start shifting colors. And he goes, and then one day somebody's going to F you up the ASS. He goes, and you're going to feel the most peace you've ever felt in your entire life. And of course, being at the place that I was at, I was just like, somebody's going to do that to me. Oh my God. Then he's like, now what I want you to do is I want you to go place yourself in the middle of chaos. the most chaos that you can imagine, and then sit in peace. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to my sister's house. I went to my sister's house because there was always drama between her and her husband because he was in the middle of like all of his drug addictions at the time. And he was like having psychotic breakdowns and all kinds of crazy stuff. And so I show up and I'm telling her, and she's like, yeah, come here. This is the biggest chaos you're going to find. And so we're sitting outside and he comes out and he starts doing some of the weirdest things. Like, I mean, it's beyond your comprehension if I tell you some of the things he did. Like, it was like, like, you know. And so Jenny and I just sat there and we started doing this. You know, we were like, peace, 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 you know. And he's like, what are y'all doing? And all of a sudden we're like, peace, 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 peace. Like, we thought that just by saying that we were going to have that inner peace. And then one day, it was, I don't know, a few months later, 6 months later, I don't know. I'm sitting outside and I was working on my book, and I was at her house and I was sitting on a lawn chair, you know, one of those lounging lawn chairs. And I'm just sitting with my computer writing. My sister comes out and she sits down, and then Haley comes out. And she's just getting up, and it's like 12 o'clock. She's got on like boy shorts on and a tank top. And her dad comes out there and he's like, you're just getting up and blah, blah, blah. And he starts on this whole thing, and he starts telling her that she needs to go change clothes. She shouldn't be walking around like this. And she needs to go out there and wash this car. And it turned into this argument that was going on. She's screaming at her dad. Her dad's screaming at her. Jenny starts taking up for Haley. And it's just this thing here. And here I am sitting at the computer doing this. And then all of a sudden they all got quiet for a second, and they looked over at me and they go, how can you sit here and be so calm while this is happening? And I said, oh, this is like better than watching the Kardashians. You know, it's like, it's reality TV. It's entertaining. And they were just like, what? It's cool. And they're like, well, what are your thoughts on all this? And I said, you don't want to know my thoughts. And they're like, yes, we do. Because Haley thought I was going to take up for her. Jenny thought I was going to take up for her. Jason thought I was going to take up for him. And so I just looked at them and I said, you don't want to know. And they're like, all at the same time. I said, yes, we do. And I said, all right, close my computer. And I said, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're right. You're right. You're right. And they were like, what? And I go, Haley, you need to learn to respect your father. Okay. Jason, if you want to ask her something, why don't you understand why she doesn't want to wash the car? You know, it's 110 degrees outside. Why don't you ask her to do it when it's not quite so hot? Maybe if you ask her instead of demanding, she might do it. Jenny, Haley does need responsibilities. She's a little too lazy. She needs some chores. You know, so I was like, and I said, here's what I have to say. And they were like, okay. And then I just opened my computer back and I started typing, and they started arguing again. And they were just like, how can you be so calm? And I think that thing you said,
you need the room to be quiet so it can meditate for you.
So it can meditate for you, right? Exactly. That's the whole point. When you finally get into a place where you're at peace, then none of this stuff affects you. And it's an ongoing process. It is called mastery. I can tell you that I thought I mastered that, and then one day I didn't. And then so it was like starting all over again. It's an ongoing goal. So our goal here as spiritual teachers is to just be the best version of ourselves, also walk the walk, try not to put so much pressure on other people to be something that they're not ready to be, and allow them to have that spiritual growth. I think that you've said a lot of really important things that I think really rang true. And I hope you guys were really listening to what she said. This is some really great knowledge, you know, to understand where your boundaries need to be, but also understanding that you've got to give people the space to be able to grow and give them that opportunity. Do you have anything to say before we close?
You know, I just have one thing, just a little tidbit.
One little tidbit.
For those of you who are, you know, really, you're moving into really dedicating yourself to a spiritual path, or you've been on one for a long time, I want you to understand that self-mastery is the first step to the pathway of illumination. So it is not the pathway. A lot of people think mastering the mind, the emotions, the physical body, your passions, etc. That's all the path. No, it's the prelim to the path. And that's why it's so important for you to learn to become a true master of yourself, not to repress things and shove them off, to recognize when you're being reactive internally and ask yourself why and explore that and apply the appropriate measures to overcoming whatever that was the root of the reaction, healing yourself and bringing yourself to some semblance of inner peace. Once you do that, then you can actually enter into the pathway of illumination and really start to experience the fullness of your connection with the divinity. But it doesn't happen. You might have little flashes, right? Little flashes of downloads and these kind of things. But to have the true connection consistently all the time, you have to have mastery over self, because these types of reactions, they muddy the waters. So
That's
you can't, yeah, you can't receive a true message or give true healing or connect with someone in a manner of true compassion if you can't receive the fullness of that light. You only do that when you're an empty vessel, when you're in a state of pure equilibrium. That's when it all comes in. That's when you can do things like heal instantaneously. You can call down the powers to heal someone in the hospital and watch their vital signs change literally right there when you're a vessel.
I agree with you 100%. And that's where people don't understand. They try to conquer. They just like, okay, I want to be spiritual. And it's like, okay, but we have to work on this self-mastery here. You have to master the inside, the mind, the emotions and all that kind of stuff. Thank you for bringing that up. It's so important. This has been a great conversation, and I hope that you got something out of it. Remember, we're always here for you, and I'm going to put the contact information in the description if you want to reach out to either one of us, and we will talk to you soon.